this. And welcome everybody to our May is for Mystery series again tonight. We're ending our week with Clea Simon. She is the author of cozy, feline, and psychodrama mystery books. Her series include, amongst others, Witchcats of Cambridge. It's a cozy paranormal mystery series. Dark dystopian series called Blackie and Care. Theta Kraken, Cats and Crime and Rock and Roll mystery series. She's also the author of many essays, which have been in several anthologies. And she was awarded, among other things, the Cat Rights Association Presidential Award. Clea, welcome to A Free Thinker's Corner. May is for Mystery Writers.
Thanks for having me. It's
Series.
lovely to be here virtually.
So what is a Cat Writers Association Presidential Award?
The Cat Writers Association is an international association of people who write about cats. And before you say anything, it's not all just people who write cozy mystery writers. We have veterinary writers, a lot of nonfiction writers. In fact, we fiction writers are sort of the outliers, but it's a welcoming group. It's a fantastic group of professionals. And it's sort of our go-to. You know, we have a conference every year. Last year it's been virtual, of course. But you know, if I want to find out the research being done on feline leukemia or the connection between there was some studies on COVID that was using cat genetics, and there'll be somebody there who can answer those questions. And you know, and those of us who write cat mysteries are also involved, like Shirley Rousseau Murphy, who writes mysteries, and Amy Shoje, who writes actually mysteries that involve all animals. You know, we come into play too, but we all, you know, those of us who write about animals, even in fiction, we want our animals to be as real as our people. So it's really useful to have a go-to place. So every year we have writing awards. We call them the Muse Medallions, and I've been lucky enough to be honored with several Muse Medallions. But the President's Award was for my first cat mystery, Mew is for Murder, and it was a great honor. And they choose one book a year, and I'm very proud to have won it.
Nice. Well, congratulations. You also write nonfiction, which we'll get to in a little bit, but it's called Feline Mystique, on the mysterious connection between women and cats. We actually had a couple of people order it, so that was good. So you kind of run the whole gamut. There seems to be a theme to all your series, some sort of a paranormal, psychological suspense sort of. Let me start by asking, why cats?
Why not cats?
Yeah, fair enough.
Some of it's very basic in that I love cats and I have cats and I can relate to cats. Some of it is, if you want to take it a step further, a cat, when you're writing fiction, it's always useful to have a device that allows you to show what your characters are thinking. And the way we act toward our pets or towards other people's pets is very revealing. I mean, you know, the person who's sweet to your face but then kicks your dog, that says something. And also, so many of us talk to our animals, and that's another, you know, very easy way of revealing things about people. But beyond that, I just love cats. And not all my books have cats in them. Not all my books are paranormal either. Right. But they're great companion animals. Most of writing, as I'm sure you and I'm sure that a lot of your people know, most of writing is just sitting alone and getting the words on the paper. And you know, when you do that, if you have a cat, cat's great company.
Well, I think what I meant to say earlier was you kind of run the whole gamut with, like I said, you got paranormal, you got suspense, you got noir, you've got cozies. Let's start with the Witchcats of Cambridge. It's a series. Sure. It's a sweet and magical cozy series featuring a young woman who wants to be a witch. Oh, there's the paranormal again. And the three cats who really have the power. Tell us about the Witchcats of Cambridge series.
Thanks for asking. And you were not incorrect before. I just wanted to expand on everything. The Witchcats of Cambridge series came to me. It just seemed like such a fun, obvious idea. that I live. Well, actually, now live in Somerville, but in this area, there's a lot of, you know, love of the occult and Wiccan, and you know, the idea of you know, earth magic, and just trying to sort of summon up something like that. But what if the truth was that we had no power and it was really our pets? So that was the basis for my character, Becca, who's a human who's, you know, when the series starts in a spell of murder, she's facing some difficulty. She's just been through a bad breakup. She's lost her job. And she's discovered, through some genealogical research, that she's related to some of the women who were persecuted as witches in the 17th century. So she decides that she's a witch, or she'd like to be a witch, and she desperately wants to be a witch. And she joins a coven, because that is the kind of thing we have around here, a circle. And she's trying all these spells, and she's reading all these books. But unfortunately, just as she's trying out a summoning spell, which is supposed to pull something from the ether, one of her cats, who's feeling lazy and doesn't want to move to a more comfortable spot, summons a pillow. Because of course, cats have magical powers, and I'll get to that in a second. But because her cat has done it, Becca thinks that she has power. And so suddenly she's the star of the coven, but you know, needless to say, she's not able to reproduce this magical feat. And thinking that she has magic gets her in a little bit over her head. Before you say anything about cats having magical powers, if you have a cat, you'll know sometimes the cat just disappears. You have no idea where the cat is. And then the cat just appears. And you're sure that you closed the door, the cat's there.
Yep.
Enough said. Cats have magical powers.
So I had researched my ancestry and found out that Mary Esty, who was hung in the Salem witch trials in 1692, is my 9th great grandmother. So I'm a descendant from. Yeah, it was pretty exciting to, tragic, but exciting at the same time to, you know, to have that
Tragedy
relationship.
removed by history is fun.
Yeah. So before we go any further, do you practice the dark arts?
Alas, I do not. I have, however, been to several workshops. I wish that I had some kind of power, but I think the most I have is that I'm a cat whisperer. Today I was visiting with a friend who warned me. She said, you know, Chippy, her cat, she says, Chippy will attack anybody. And by the end of the visit, Chippy was sniffing my hand and, you know, had accepted me.
That's kind of like my daughter. She's the animal whisperer. She always has, or more so, like butterflies and dragonflies. She always has them landing on her, and it's kind of neat. So with all your series that have to deal with the occult and with the paranormal and stuff, what kind of research did you have to do? Did you talk to anybody in covens in your area, or just through sort of book research?
No, I love book research. I mean, obviously I'm a book person, but also I think it's important to talk to people and to take part in, you know, things like circles. I love the idea of Wicca. I mean, I was raised, I guess culturally, I'm Jewish, but I was raised going to Quaker meeting. And so I like to think that I have a sort of open mind about religion. And I love the idea of a Wiccan circle. And it's, you know, it's really just about sort of connecting with a basic earth power. And it involves respect. I mean, the rule of 3 is basically anything that you give out, you get back in 3, and that's one of the reasons that you don't ever want to hurt anybody. It's the golden rule, sort of, you know, even more so. I was about to say on steroids, but it's more like the golden rule on estrogen. I think it's a beautiful thing, and so yes, I've taken part in circles, and I've taken part in various rituals, and you know, all the people I meet, they tend to be wonderful people, tend to be environmentalists. Tend to be sort of socially progressive, and I think that's wonderful. I wish I had magic, but I do not.
Do you ever think of joining them, or
I
is it?
have. I'm not a good joiner. I think this goes back to being a writer again. You know, we essentially sit alone in our rooms. But,
Well, there's a lot of solitary witches or Wiccans too. Did you ever think about just doing sort of a solo practice, or?
um, I have. I think in my own way, I have my own rituals, but
Mhm.
I guess I'm. Is it a syncretism or a cretism? I just sort of pull little bits from here and there to
Right.
make my own personal spirituality.
Okay. So your next series that you have is the Blackie and Care Mystery series. Says here on your website that it's the darkest of your cat mysteries. It's a chat noir series featuring Care, a homeless teen, and is narrated by Blackie, the cat, her feline companion, as the negative, or as they navigate a dystopian city. So, how do you have a cat narrate a story?
Very simple. He reads the story. There's an interesting, I hope interesting, origin story for the Blackie and Care series, though, and that the Blackie and Care series started. I don't remember what prompted me to think of this, but I just thought, what if Sherlock Holmes were a cat? And I was thinking of is it the Rickendael Falls where Holmes dies, and he's then Arthur Conan Doyle brought him back, the Reichenbach Falls, and I just thought, well, what if he came back as a cat, but what if he didn't? And he wants to figure out what's happened. But what if Sherlock Holmes came back as a cat, and he wanted to figure out who had killed him? But then, because he's just woken up in the body of a cat, maybe he doesn't realize he's a cat yet.
Hmm.
And so this started sort of as a pastiche of the Sherlock Holmes mysteries with a detective character who is originally just known as the Old Man. And he wakes up and he's got some memories, but he's not really sure what's going on. And there's this sort of street urchin type young teen who he bonds with. So that was sort of my take on Sherlock Holmes and the Baker Street Irregulars.
It was a science fiction book I read a long, long time ago, so I don't remember the name or who wrote it. But it had to do with the main character, through surgery, was able to have his body changed into the alien form to the planet that he was going to for whatever the reason was. But as the surgeons or the doctors kept changing him for new assignments, he lost more and more of himself until he could no longer think as a human. Yeah, it was
Great
pretty.
concept.
So you got to wonder if you're able to, well, like an animagus or a weird animal or something. You wonder if they did it too many times, too much, do they start losing their humanity and actually become more and thinking like that animal? And if that
and with
happens,
whatever you lose, what do you gain?
right, and but do you if you can change yourself into any animal you want, do you start thinking like that? Therefore, you can't change back into human because now you think,
Yeah.
kind of one of those things to think about. So another series that you have is Theta Krakow Mystery Series. Features a freelance rock music critic and her cat, another cat. The book also addresses such animal issues as hoarding and puppy kitten mills. So this one has sort of a social theme to it.
Yeah. That was my very first series that I wrote, the Theta Krakow series. That was for Poison Pen, and there were 4 of those books. Mew is for Murder was the first of those. With those books, those actually came directly out of my nonfiction book, The Feline Mystique, because in The Feline Mystique, I discussed the problem of so-called animal hoarding. The crazy cat lady. And I spent some time with a woman she was sort of a borderline hoarder, like animal control was aware of her. That's how I had found her. And she had, she still had the power turned on, and, the place she was able to feed herself and feed her animals, but they were keeping an eye on her because she was just sort of on the edge of tipping over. And as you probably know, as a lot of people probably know, they're now saying that this is a manifestation of obsessive compulsive disorder. People don't realize that it's gone this far. And most of the time, people who hoard animals believe they're saving them all, even when the animals are unhealthy. They really think that they're saving them, and it's sad for the animals. It's very sad for the people as well. and it's not pleasant. I mean, it's very hard to, if you have, and it's not a certain number, it's how many you can care for, but it's like you get to these situations that aren't clean and they're not healthy for animal or beast. And it hit me when I was there. And I'm a cat person, and I was a little freaked out. And she was telling me about how her neighbors hated her, and may or may not have injured, or killed one of her cats. And it occurred to me as I was leaving, after speaking with her, my interview with her, that if somebody like her was killed, there would be a lot of people, would be suspects. And then it also occurred to me that if she were killed, I was wondering what would happen to the cats. So in my first mystery, Muse for Murder, a woman who is a supposed cat hoarder is killed. And we have to not only solve the mystery, but we have to find a home for the cats.
Hmm.
But that series also, that was very reality based. And I did want to deal with animal issues, which, was great fun and very interesting. And I did get to research things like puppy mills and kitten mills and, unscrupulous breeders and stuff like that.
Mhm.
It was after I wrote that series that I sort of had a flip, in that series, the animals, and I love the animals and I hope that they are well portrayed, but the animals were only animals and they didn't talk. And then somewhere in there, I realized, I was like, oh, I'm never going to write talking animals. Those are cutesy, blah, blah, blah. And it occurred to me, if you have a pet, you talk to your pet. And, if you're honest with yourself, you pretend at least that you're hearing your animal talk back. I got you.
Guilty.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah, yeah. So I started writing animals that talk. I mean, even if nobody else can hear them, they can hear each other. And
Mhm.
sometimes their people can hear them.
Well, that's what I was going to ask. Do the human uh, 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 owners of the animals, do they hear the cats speak, or?
It depends on the series. The Theta Krakow series, the cats don't talk, so we don't hear them. But we pick up clues from their behavior. The other thing is writing with animals is great because their senses are so much more powerful than ours. Like, if a dog reacts to something, something's there. Same with a
Mhm.
cat. It's like, if they arch their back, if their ears go back, dogs and cats can, they can hear things. Prey animals, bunnies. I have one book, When Bunnies Go Bad, or birds. They are on the alert because they have to be for their life. And so you can trust them to pick up clues that we don't pick up. But Theta does not hear the cats talk, though she can pick up signals from the cats. Prue Marlowe, in my Pet Noir series, she's an animal communicator, so she can hear what animals are thinking. They don't speak to her per se, but she can pick up what they're thinking and saying in their own animal ways. And Blackie and Carrick doesn't understand Blackie, but the books are narrated by Blackie anyway. So he's just, his whole life is that he's frustrated that he can't just talk. And in the Witchcats of Cambridge, yeah, Becca is clueless. She thinks her cats are just cats, and one of their big jobs is taking care of her and keeping her out of trouble.
Well, we have two dogs too, and our youngest dog, his name was Beckett, and he came from a puppy mill down in like Alabama or something like that. But we changed his name to Mango, but it was Beckett at the beginning. Yeah, he was a mango color when as a puppy. He's got a little bit more on the orange side, but or brownish side. But yeah, he was kind of mango colored when we got him. And
Lovely.
the name had to start with an M because our last one was an L, so the next one had to be an M. And let my daughter name him. But okay,
Tell me who your other dog is.
Lucky.
Lucky.
So Lucky's the older one, and HIJK. So K before that's our cat, Kitty Boo, kind of original, huh? So this Kitty Boo, Lucky, Mango. So the next animal we get, which is probably going to be another dog, because we go dog, cat, kind of, so we have two dogs and a cat. It's got to be an N. So we got to figure out an N name for the animal. So, but my ears perked up when you said When Bunnies Go Bad. Now that's part of your Prue Marlowe Pet Noir series that you were just talking about. Okay, how bad were the bunnies?
They are just being bunnies. But
Okay.
I wrote that because Prue lives in Western Mass, so there's a lot of nature around, and I wrote that the winter we had just massive snowstorms here. I think we had like 100 inches of snow. It was crazy, and I live in Somerville, which is pretty urban. and we have to keep our sidewalks cleared. So just to clear the sidewalk, we ended up sort of making this wall of snow on the edge of the sidewalk, and then cleared a path just up our steps. And so there's this wall of snow just to get it off, because you're not supposed to throw it on the street. At night, the rabbits would come up our front steps, so they could go behind the wall of snow to eat the shrubbery on the side of the house. So I just got in the habit of watching them. It's like sometimes you just see the footprints, but sometimes you could actually just see them come up, and they were so smart. They just like, well, I can't jump over this big wall of snow, so I'll just come up their front steps and go up the side. And I watched them as they basically denuded a forsythia of its bark, but they were just bunnies being bunnies. And so they're not really bad. If you garden, they can be annoying, but I think they're adorable. We call them our yard pets, and
Yeah.
we say that our yard is where the plants are in cages and the bunnies run free.
So one thing I've learned doing this series is really what a cozy mystery is. When we started our bookstore a few years ago, and I knew what mysteries were, I knew what thrillers were, I knew what suspense was. Never really understood what cozies were, but I definitely have a feel for it. But your cozies don't. Well, what I get from it is that they're supposed to be kind of lighthearted, sort of. The amateur, just non-detective person or non-law enforcement person gets into a situation and starts. Yours don't sound too lighthearted and cozy-ish.
Well, it depends on the books. The Blackie and Cares are a little scary, and I in the Blackie and Care books, both Blackie and Care are endangered. For me, I could not write a scene in which an animal is hurt. So that's, my readers don't ever have to worry about that. I just wouldn't want to read that. They are cozy in the sense that they're puzzle mysteries that I give you all the clues, and if you're a careful reader, you can figure out who did it. And I think that's an element of the cozy. It's that whodunit quality. It's not going to be something from out of left field. They're also cozy in that I like to think that they give you a sense of justice, that all is made right by the end. I mean, I think that's one of the joys of reading mysteries, and cozies in particular, is that something's happened when the book opens that disturbs the order of the universe. But by the end, through the efforts of an amateur sleuth, people, just sort of everyday people who you as the reader can relate to, things are put right. Even if there isn't necessarily always police justice, things in some way are put right. Things that were hidden become known. And so there should be this sense of, I don't know, everything's tied together and everything should make sense, and you should feel like the world is made right again. My books are cozy in that sense. That, and also I don't write a lot of violence. As they say, in a cozy, the blood is dry before it hits the page. And the sex is pretty much off screen too. So yeah, some people say mine are more amateur sleuth than cozy, so maybe they're slightly, an edge off. But that to me is what makes it cozy. It's just sort of a satisfying traditional puzzle mystery where if you're a careful reader, you can figure out what happened. And also cozies are very character based. You read them because they're your friends. And that's one of the reasons that writing series is so great, because I get attached to my characters too. I want to continue with them.
So with your more darker dystopian ones, how dark do you get? Do you get like Gotham City, Batman sort of dark, or kind of Hunger Games kind of dystopian dark?
Well, the Blackie and Care series is sort of Hunger Games dark. It is in a ruined futuristic city. And that's why Care, this teenage girl, is living out on her own. She's basically escaped from a gang. She's an orphan. And she befriends this bedraggled feral black cat who, we know has, intelligence, but she just thinks it's this other living creature, and they're alone and making do in this ruined city, which is sort of run by crime bosses. Other than that, in the sort of more realistic world, I have one that, for lack of a better catch-all. My publishers call psychological suspense. I had World Enough come out in 2017, and my next book, Hold Me Down, they're very dark. Not in the sense of Gotham City. They're based in reality. In a past life, was a music critic, and they are set in the music world, and they deal with they deal with real issues of PTSD and trauma and substance abuse. And again, there's in both there's a mystery, and in both the protagonist is an amateur sleuth, but it's not like she goes, aha, I'm going to solve this crime. It's more, it's people get drawn into these situations and they want to understand what happened, and by the end they understand what happened. I won't say more than that, because things are dark, people go through stuff, life is not necessarily set right, but by the end you know what happened.
That was going to be my next point was
Right.
no, that's great. It's a great segue into that you were a rock music critic. You used to write for everyone from the Boston Phoenix to Rolling Stone, and World Enough is your standalone psychological suspense, where it takes you back into the clubs. I like the way you wrote it. World Enough, it takes you back into the clubs, the sticky floors, and all. So what was your most interesting or favorite concert that you ever went to write about?
Wow, there are too many. I'll give you a few. When REM was first playing around, some friends of mine had that, I think it was an EP, and I just didn't hear what was special about it. But I was assigned to cover them. They played it at Boston University, and I was sick. I had like the flu or something, so I was kind of fevery, and the sound was bad because it was, like a gym. But there was something about being kind of sick and hearing they had those, those chimey guitars, and this was in the era when you couldn't understand what Michael Stipe was saying. It's like, oh my God, this is Nirvana. Speaking of which, Nirvana, they played it was the In Utero Tour, and I'd heard them, they had a couple albums out by then, but that was, like that was one of those live shows where you go, nothing that they've done on record can capture this. I mean, this is just, this is like something that's just like electricity to the head. But other than that, one of my great loves was always the club shows. Seeing that Boston had this great local scene. Bands like there's a local label called Rum Bar Records, which is reissuing a bunch. I saw that they're reissuing a collection by a band that was called the Dogmatics.
Mm-hmm.
And they were basically active 1981 to 1986. Oops, lost you.
Yeah,
and bands like the Dogmatics and the Prime Movers and the Blackjacks and Salem 66. It was a scene, so it was a social world. It was everybody went out all the time, and some of the music that was made, it blows my mind. Like Throwing Muses, and the scene in Boston was very much a punk / garage scene. So it was very, very loud guitars, and I love that as much as anyone else. But Throwing Muses came on the scene, and they were these kids from Rhode Island, and they were, at that point, they were, I think, all underage, except maybe Leslie, their bassist. And they were incorporating, because Kristen Hirsch and her sister, half-sister, Tanya Donnelly, were so inventive. They were incorporating screams and sounds and just this weird stuff. And so like half the people on the scene were like, oh, they're just weird faking kids. And the rest of us were like, no, there's something real here. It's like there was a band that almost broke out, the story of Boston rock, called Human Sexual Response. And the guitarist from Human Sexual Response, their big hit was I Want to Be Jackie Onassis. Went on, and a bunch of them formed a band that went through a couple of name changes, was eventually called the Zulus. And Rich Gilbert, who now lives in Nashville, is this amazing guitarist, and didn't play, you traditionally have the Berklee School of Music in Boston, so you have a lot of people who can
Right.
play a lot of notes very fast. With him, it was playing the electricity. It was, manipulating the feedback and just getting these incredible, just getting something new. And the fact that this was going on and people would play each other's gigs and they'd play each other's loft parties, and people would, there was just all this intermingling. It was just an incredibly wonderful, fertile time. And I play bass poorly. So my main way into it was writing about it. And, not so much a critic in the sense of judging, although if you're a critic, you do that, but just trying to explore it and explain it and go, aha, I hear the precedent here. What if you hear this? Well, obviously he's drawing from this and from this, and she's pulling this here, but she's doing it in this sort of inverted way. And isn't this interesting? And when you listen to this, try to imagine that, and just sort of, helping sort of carry the conversation along.
How close did you get to the bands? Did you like get to go backstage, or were you just sort of
Oh
in the
yeah,
back and writing about what
yeah.
you saw and heard?
Yeah. I mean, it was
Cool.
a very incestuous scene, and especially writing for newspapers and magazines. Yeah, I've had Johnny Rotten yell at me because he didn't think I was paying attention. Um, you yeah,
So
you name it. Yeah.
so I'm a heavy metal hair bands. The 80s is what I grew up in. Um, and then so the 90s really didn't do, yeah, absolutely didn't do a lot for me until later on. I found European metal, a lot of the bands of a symphonic metal, things like that.
I'm a
So
Lemmy fan from way back.
uh-huh, uh-huh.
Loudest shows I've ever heard are Lemmy and Motorhead, and all you
Nice.
hear is "ar ar 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 ar."
Right, right.
But I
So
love
do
the
you
hair
think
bands too. Rat and all those bands.
oh
Those were
yes.
fun.
Yeah, and I didn't get to see them at the time,
I'm
but
old.
when they did all that, oh, what's that?
I think I'm older than you.
But when they started coming around again in the 2000s and stuff and doing reunion tours and things like that, that's when I really was able to hit them up, and they were great. Do you think writing for Rolling Stone and the magazines and stuff helped get you writing with just writing novels in general, or did you start even before when you were a kid writing things?
I started as a kid. I think if you write, you write. I mean, when I was, I have still from my mom. She saved a short story that I wrote. When I could barely form the letters. I think we were supposed to. The prompt was a picture of a frog with a crown, and we were supposed to be able to write the frog prince. But I created the story where the frog had been bewitched, and he was told that if he hopped to the end of the world, he would be turned back into a human. But he tried to hop and he couldn't hop, and he tried to swim and he couldn't swim. So basically, then he settles down and decides that it's a good thing to be a frog prince. And he marries a lady frog and he lives very happily as a frog. So I was writing stories even from then. But having said that, yeah, and then I went to journalism because journalism seemed like a way to to make a living as a writer. And I was a straight journalist, for a while, and did that through through high school and through college. And I was freelancing for a local newspaper when I was sort of dragged into being a music critic, and that one of the other women at the newspaper, Kathy Logue, if you're seeing this, if you're on the Facebook Live, she pitched a column on local music, and they said, okay, you can do it, but you have to do it every week. And she didn't want to write every week, so she said, Clea will share it with me. She'll write on the off weeks. And she said, I'll tell you what to do. And I had been a music fan and I had played in bands. So that, that got me into it. So and after that, I did end up working, I still do some arts journalism, and that, like, I do book reviews and things like that. But all of it, just to go back to your question, I think all of it feeds into the writing because you learn how to write about things. How do you describe something? How do you describe something that's happened in terms of action? Or, how do you even describe an emotional response? They say writing about music is like bicycling about architecture. But if you can find a way to put something into words, whether it's covering a hockey game, and say, that half the people have already seen the game, on TV. So why would they read your piece? Because you can capture something. You've got a particular angle. And it's the same with a news story. It's the same with writing about the arts. And yes, I know news is supposed to be objective, but I guess you could say this is the Boston Phoenix. I came up in the sort of the new journalism school where we were taught that you aim for objectivity. Pure objectivity, just the facts, is actually impossible. So what you try to do is be very aware of your subjectivity and make it clear, like say, I'm writing from this angle.
Mhm.
And I'm trying to give you all the facts. Be aware that I am writing from this angle. And all of that, helps you, sharpen your tools.
I've done a little bit of writing, some poetry, some short stuff, just dabbling in it, but I cannot for the life of me write a review. I just can't. Something about a book review or a music review. I liked it. I really liked it. That's about as far as I can get.
Why?
I don't. I have a hard time putting it. I can describe it, but I have a hard time putting it on paper. I know what I want to say, but something fiction or like I said, even poetry, that's not easy, but I have an easier time doing that. So
I
for
just jump in and say, it is legitimate to not want to analyze something if it gives you pleasure. Sometimes there's that fear that if you analyze it, it'll break it. So you don't have to.
either that or that, and maybe just the idea of if I didn't like it and I put it out there, that I might upset somebody, but at the same time, if it's a good review.
Yeah.
But so let's talk a little bit more about that, your World Enough. Tell us the storyline about that, and then your Hold Me Down is coming out in October of this year.
Thank you. Well, World Enough, maybe this will sound a little familiar. The protagonist is a woman who used to be a music critic. And now she's moved on to have just a series of, straight world jobs. She's working as a publicist, and she runs into someone from her past who says that who's at a big, glossy city magazine and wants to do a retrospective, like whatever happened to, one of those pieces. And she's intrigued partly because her local scene did have somebody who was, poised to be a star, and then he died. And it was like, well, that's really, sad. It was drugs, and he took it too far, and he died. But as she goes back, so she sort of figures that'll be the hook for her story. And as she goes back, she starts uncovering, more connections, more relations, and also she starts to come to terms with the fact that this golden era of her youth maybe wasn't so golden. Maybe there were things going on that either she wasn't aware of or that she was aware of and didn't want to admit to herself. So it's about the mystery of what happened back in the day, but it's also her coming to terms with, with the rosy glasses of nostalgia and accepting, what happened back then and maybe why she is where she is now.
It's kind of, have you heard in the news lately that there's a little I have an issue with my video here. I'm still here, don't worry. So I can get this fixed. But anyways, there's with Kurt Cobain, that it may not have been drugs or anything. So so your book kind of sounds a little prescient, really, that
Well, when I was writing World Enough, they also found the remains of the man who had been managing one of the clubs in town, and there was a mob connection, a Whitey Bulger connection, and so yeah, that was it was the kind of thing that everyone kind of knew. It was like, well, it was this big cash business, and it was on the edge of South Boston, and that broke when I was writing that, so I sort of wrote that in a little bit more. It's like Hold Me Down is, I take it sort of closer to the music scene. Hold Me Down focuses on a woman who was a rock star for a hot minute and toured and had the major label support and all that stuff, which bands pretty much don't have now, but they did back in the day. But she's back in town. She's sort of retired for reasons that become clear. She's back in town because her beloved drummer has died, and she's playing. There's like a reunion. There's a benefit for her, for her drummer's widower and daughter, and she's up on stage and she's playing, and for a minute she has what musicians call a memory slip, which is where you forget your own song. And she realizes it's because she thought she saw somebody in the audience, and it's like, no, there's no way he could be there. And the next day she finds out that that person was there, and that he's been found dead behind the venue, behind the club. And then her her beloved dead friend's widower is arrested for the murder. So, and worse, he doesn't want to defend himself, and so she gets involved. And it I've talked to enough, and I've talked to enough musicians. I have friends who've been through that. So this is more not from the writer's point of view, it's from the musician's point of view. What happened back in the day, what it was like to be a touring female musician, in the 90s, and how people end up in the situations they are now. I don't want to give more away, but
right. So
there's a body.
So obviously a lot of this for these two books has been from your experience being in the clubs and your writing through the magazines and papers and stuff. How much extra did you have to do researching as far as like the psychological aspects of like the drug abuse and just some of the other psychological aspects of musicianships and being a musician in the club scene?
Well, in addition to sitting down and talking to some women about, like, okay, your name's not going to be in this. Tell me the truth. Tell me the truth about when you took time off in London and weighed all of 85 pounds, and what was going on with that. But beyond that, I incorporated in Hold Me Down some traumas that I had been through, and that. Once you start talking about things like sexual assault, you realize that they're a lot more common than you knew. And so a lot of this was drawn from my experience. But I then also did a lot of research. The woman who's the executive director of the Boston Area Rape Crisis Center has been incredibly helpful, and she read an early version of this. And it's sort of, you pull from different places. Like a few years ago, and I think this is when I was first starting on this, Chrissy Hind of the Pretenders gave an interview, and she's older than I am. She's in her 60s. She gave an interview, and that's relevant because she gave an interview to The Guardian where she talked about when she was in her early 20s and she was gang raped by a bunch of bikers. And this is, Chrissy now in her 60s. She blamed herself for being foolish. I'm like, dear heart, you were a kid, But one of the things, and this is a story that I hear over and over, and I wove this into Hold Me Down, is that you hear from people who've been through trauma, especially rape survivors, that too often rape survivors tend to blame themselves. They tend to say, well, it's because I did this, and partly that's because the world blames rape survivors. The world says, well, why were you dressed like that? Why were you drinking? Why were you out there? But also psychologically, it is easier to blame yourself and to act as if and pretend that you had some culpability, because the culpability in this sort of weird, twisted way also gives you control. If you say, this happened because I did this, the implication is, if I hadn't done that, I would have been okay. And it is harder in our minds, it breaks our minds more to admit that something happened to us without our control. It's harder to accept that we had no say in what was done to us or with us. It is easier to blame ourselves. So when I heard Chrissy Hynde say that, 40 odd years after the fact, and, a, theoretically a mature adult, still blaming her young self for being stupid and getting herself into the situation, it broke my heart. I don't know if that answers your question, but
Yeah, yeah. So with some of these themes in your book, are you worried about um, somebody reading them or being sort of triggering themes for people, or did you write it in a way where not necessarily softens or just use softer language to bring out so that it may not be as triggering? You know what I'm saying?
I do know what you're saying. I do not write torture porn. Um, I think that um, there is too much writing about violence, particularly violence against women, that is written in a voyeuristic fashion, and that is triggering and horrible and painful. I think that what I try to do is write honestly and with compassion, but most of all honestly. I'll give you an example. There was a TV show, HBO picked it up, called "I May Destroy You." Um, it aired just this past year. Fantastic series. I can't recommend it enough. In which the opening, the setup is a woman who's out drinking with her friends, um, realizes in flashbacks that she was drugged and raped, and the series is her working through that. And you could say it's triggering, but it's also such clear-eyed, compassionate recognition of the facts. And it's never shown like, there's nothing sexy about it. And you don't see the man looking down on her. You see it from her point of view. What was this like? And it's like, catching the glimpse of a face, or having your head hit something. And it's so real that is what I tried to do. It's not a question of triggering. It's a question of recognition, of saying the truth out loud, because that is freeing. What's triggering is other people, getting off on your pain. But if it's just saying, this is who we are, and we survived, and this is the reality. It's not glamorous and it's not sexy. This is just what happened. These are the different ways that our minds and our bodies protect ourselves. Like in Hold Me Down, my narrator is very unreliable because she has incorporated, it's almost like, this is the grain of sand and she's made a pearl out of it. She's created this whole persona that, is largely defensive, but it's understandable why it is. And it's been useful to her. And then it's just a question of, as she heals and as she comes to terms with things, now that she's in a safer place, does she want to go back and figure out what happened?
So it's written more in a compassionate or sympathetic
Yeah.
way than.
Yeah. And yes. And I think honesty is the answer. I think things that trigger because there's something manipulative or sly, or the catch-all term is torture porn. But yeah, I think you're just saying this is reality, and and this is our point of view. It's from the female gaze, I guess you could say.
Did you talk to like psychologists and stuff about this as far as doing your research and
Yeah.
about this?
Yeah. And yeah, I learned a lot, and a lot of it was just validating for what I sensed. But yes.
So with your kind of back to your nonfiction, the Feline Mystique, we had touched on that briefly. What kind of, other than speaking with, so I would think that you wrote that one as well with a very compassionate, sort of sympathetic, when you were writing about this hoarder of cats. What other research did you do for that? Did you talk to psychologists and psychiatrists and therapists and things
Oh, I
about?
did, but the Feline Mystique is, I mean, the cat hoarding is just one part of that. I had so
Right.
much fun with that book. I have mythology. So I did a lot of reading on that. And I talked to people, I talked to dozens of women and their cats, and about their relationship with their cats. I talked to people who do cat rescue and, trap, neuter, return, which is people who um, basically adopt feral cat colonies, and they trap them, they neuter them, they'll get them their shots, but often these animals can't be socialized, and they're only happiest back in where they were. So that's why trap, neuter, return, and like they'll snip the ear so you know that animal's been neutered. But yeah, just doing the research and the mythology alone was a blast. It's like, how many civilizations have cat goddesses? And tracing that back, stuff like that was just so much fun. Cats in literature. That was just fun.
Do you ever find yourself going so far down one direction? Wait. I need to get back over here, just because it was so.
This is basically
all
my
that.
cat books. I mean, my books are the ones that you see, but there's so many other books in there. Cat behavior and cats for dummies and cats in literature, and yeah.
So with all these different styles of mystery, so you got the noir, you got the cozies, you got these more social aspects. What did you grow up on reading? Because it sounds like the paranormal, because you're mixing all these different separate genres into your mysteries and stuff, which I found that a lot of people, a lot of writers do that, even with romance and fantasy. We did a fantasy romance month back in February, and I didn't realize that Hunger Games and Twilight, those are considered fantasy romances, because I think of romance as just Fabio with the hair on the white horse on the beach, and fantasy is Tolkien and those type of things. But so what did you read growing up and stuff that made you decide to mix the genres?
Well, I read the Narnia books. I read C.S. Lewis, and before I realized it was Christian allegory, not being raised in the Christian tradition, I just thought, okay, they worship a lion. This makes perfect sense to me. A lion is God, and I'm a massive Tolkien head. I have read The Lord of the Rings more times, and the Silmarillion, and the Hobbit, more times than my husband is very tolerant. He now knows that I can. He understands when I start quoting things. Like during COVID, we've gone for a lot of long walks, and so he's learned. And we look at the trees, and so he's learned about the ants and the ant wives. So yes, so C.S. Lewis and Tolkien, everything by Tolkien. Robert Graves for the mythology, which I love. I grew up, my parents had just this big, I think it was Robert Graves, a collection of the Greek myths, and I just absorbed those. And classic fairy tales. The Northern European fairy tales, the Brothers Grimm, the Wonder Clock. There were this. My mother was a visual artist, a painter, and so she would buy these books that were illustrated by Arthur Rackham and these great Victorian illustrators for the art, and I loved them for the stories. And one of the things that I loved about those stories is they all tend to be a little bloody. They're not, this is before they got Disneyfied, these stories. And I love those. And what's the same with Tolkien and with Lewis. There is a sense of reality. I mean, Bruno Bettelheim has been a little discredited these days, but the idea that children want some darkness in their stories because they know that there's darkness in the real world, and they want some acknowledgement of it, and they want to know that it can be survived. That was certainly true for me. I read mysteries as a kid. I read the Encyclopedia Brown mysteries. I was more an Encyclopedia Brown kid than a Nancy Drew kid, but loved those as well. I loved animals, so Walter Farley's Black Stallion series, because what did anyone want more than to be cast away on an island with a horse?
Right.
Yeah, all those books, and I still have one of these other shelves. I have a shelf and a half of my favorite children's books, which sometimes I read still and sometimes I don't, but I just need to have them there. Edward Gorey, there's your perfect blend of imagination and a little bit of something a little dark and gothic
Yeah.
or macabre.
I guess when you had mentioned children need a little darkness, I guess it's one of the criticisms of Walt Disney, is that he's taken these fairy tales and made them all happily ever after, happy ending stuff. When
Yeah,
in reality, Grimm's fairy tales and
or grim.
Aesop's fables and stuff, they're grim and they're
Yeah.
not always. Um, so is that what made you think of sort of mixing genres, or when you decided that you wanted to write mystery books, mystery stories, you wanted to do something different, and so falling back on all these type of books that you read, you put those together to come up with something different?
Chris, you make it sound so conscious. Um, I never meant to. In fact, I have tried several times to write a straight genre book, but as my agent says, I'm always quarter turn off whatever it's supposed to be. It's just I try to write a straight cozy and it comes out. Eh. So I think it's just that's just how it comes out with me. It's that's just what I've read, and maybe if I'd been brought up on Disney, that wouldn't be true. But there's all these other elements sort of fighting to get in, and.
You never watched The Wonderful World of Disney on Sunday night at
I
7 o'clock,
did. I did, but at the same time, I was
right after
also
Lawrence
reading,
Welk?
the Wonder Book with these, these horrible, grim stories, and Edward, Edward Gorey, and the Wuggly Ump is drawing nigh, you know, and that book. I'm afraid that's probably I won't, but I can quote you the whole thing. But it ends with these three children, and this monster, the Wuggly Ump, is coming to their house, and he eats them. And the last verse is sing tirlay, sing tirlump from deep inside the wuggly ump.
And that one I haven't heard. I'll have to look that one up.
It's a great one. Oh, it's really short, but it's perfect.
Now, with some of the paranormal that's in your books, do you like or do you watch those paranormal ghost shows and things like Ghost Hunters and stuff, or
Um, I'm
is it?
not a reality TV person. I like, as much as you call that reality TV, I like a really good scripted ghost story. But yeah, I want it to be written out, and I want it to have, yeah. I'll watch anything. I love a
Yeah.
good mystery, a good action adventure.
Now,
Um,
one
but
thing
yeah,
that
a good scary, spooky story.
one thing that I'm willing to bet uh, you're able to stay away from, and this is just one of the many different literary words I've learned doing all these different series and talks. Um, but tropes, uh, especially with fantasy and romance. There are people who love those things, and that's what they look for. But same with mysteries. That some people are looking for that stuff, but some people try to put a little different spin on things. I would think with your type of subject matter, you can kind of stay away from that unless.
Hmm. Well, I have two thoughts on that. One is the tropes are tropes for a reason. They satisfy, if we were mythologists, or studying mythology, or myth and legend, we'd call them archetypes. We'd say there's a reason for that. There's a reason for the wounded ruler who must learn to heal himself to heal his kingdom or her kingdom. And there's something just very emotionally satisfying. I grew up on Joseph Campbell and the Golden Bough too, so throw that in there. Um, but I try to avoid stereotypes. I'm not saying I do. The heroine who is too stupid to live. TSTL, as discussion groups they'll call her. You need sometimes to put somebody at risk. Um, but if I'm putting someone, especially my younger female protagonist, at risk, I want to make it believable that she puts herself at risk because she's worried about somebody else, or because there's a good reason. It's the only way, she'll only go down into the dark basement because she knows that she left the camera down there that has the film, or because she's heard an animal cry out in distress. So it's like, yes, I will use those tropes, but I like to try to make them believable. I try to make them real. Um, but it's a balancing act. Things become tropes because they serve an emotional purpose as much as anything. But yeah, you do want to try to make it fresh. Do I? I don't know. That's for the reader to decide. I try though. I try.
Again, I just learned something. So thinking of a trope as an archetype, I never even thought of that. So yeah, I can see why some would use that more. Um, so we had mentioned way back when, at the beginning, uh, that you do have some rituals from your talks and being in um, covens and or being with a coven for your research and your books and stuff. What kind of rituals do you have, if any? Uh, do you have to prepare yourself to write? What are your writing habits? Do you write in the morning, write in the evening? Do you know, bang a gong or grab a cup of tea or something? I know I have
No, that's a
one
good question.
writer who's very spiritual, and so she has one of those little tiny gongs there, and she just kind of rings that real quick just to get her mind in that setting. What do you have? Do you have any rituals?
I love that idea. I should get a gong. When you said bang a gong being a rock and roller, I thought T-Rex.
Yeah,
Uh,
I thought of that too.
bang a gong, you can't see it because I'm on my computer, but I have my totems. I have cat figurines. Some of them are actual. This is a Native American totem. I have I have this guy. Arr. So I have about let's see, this guy is from Benin, I think. Oops, he's stuck under the computer. I guess I'm not going to pick him up. But I have a bunch of these things here, and I need to have them neat. I need to have them in order. Like the only time pretty much I clean my desk is when I'm starting a new book. And other than that, yeah, I just sort of I used to play, and I still have some, and sometimes I still do. Um, I have this bamboo flute music that I heard when I was years ago when I was traveling through Indonesia, and I find it very sort of meditative and cleansing. And a lot of times I'll listen to that before I start. But other than that, it's just sort of making this little space. Okay, here's a little goddess. This is Shiva. Just sort of making my space right for me,
Mhm.
and um, and then just sitting down and do it. And I'm very much a word count per day person. That's my ritual, and I like doing that because I do believe that you get the rusty water out of the tap before you get the clean water. So you have to write how many thousands of just stupid bad words before you get to something good. But if you don't write the stupid bad ones, you don't get to the good ones. So I believe that. I used to be more of a morning person. Partly newspapers. I was working night shift. I now write late in the day, and partly that's because I do other things. I do some of the journalism. I do editing. It's sort of my money work, and I like to have that done for the day so that my mind is free. And then I sit down, and whatever the word count is that I've set for myself, and sometimes that's set because I have a deadline, and sometimes it's just sort of this is what I want to do: 1,000 words a day, 1,500 words a day. Um, I don't get up until I've done that, and that feels important to me. And sometimes I go way over that. I actually try to stop myself because one of the things that I've learned is, other people have talked about this as well. It's better to stop while you know what you want to write next because it makes it easier to start the next day.
Mm.
So if I'm doing 1,500 words a day and I've hit 1603, and I'm like, oh, but I just gotta have this next scene. It's like, no, 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 just write like a sentence so that to remind yourself to prime the pump the next day. Put it away. And because that means that the next day it'll be easy. Like you'll sit down and the first 600 words will just pop right out.
Well, I was going to ask, you went traditional publishing for all your books. Um, and I was going to ask, is it your word count for the day? Is that self-imposed or is that deadline?
It's a
Um,
mix. Yeah.
kind of a mix of both.
Yeah. It's
Uh,
like if someone says, I need your next book by August 1st, and I have 20,000. If I sold a book on 20,000 words and they want 80,000 words, and it's August 1st, I'll sit down and think, count up the work days because I try not to work on weekends. Take out the vacation days, take out as many days as I reasonably can to revise it, and then I divide that up. So yeah, it'll be like, oh, if I write 1,375 words a day, I can have a draft 1 month before it's due. and that'll give me, I can put it aside for a week and then I can read it through, So yeah, sometimes it's purely utilitarian and not fun.
What's your average word count for your novels?
I think they tend to be in the high 70,000s, like 77 to 85,000. I think they always grow. They always grow. My first drafts tend to be short. It's like I realize it's like I just wanted to get something down, and what happens when I read things through is I think, oh, I thought there was so much more here, and I realize no, it's still in my head. I didn't put it down on the paper.
Now, when you're done with your first draft, do you go through and edit it, or do you use beta readers to do that? Especially with like your rock and roll ones, those psychological ones. Do you have technical editors, I guess, people for that specific part? Do you write those parts and give them to somebody to edit before you continue on? What's your writing process like as far as writing and editing?
Nobody sees anything pretty much until I have a draft. With the rare exception of sometimes I'll ask my husband, who's also a writer, to read things, and the way I phrase it is this anything? And he now knows me well enough to know that I don't want an edit. I just want to hear, well, I don't think you have a point of view here. I don't think you have a story here, or this is good, keep going. But then I figure I do have beta readers. I don't want to use up their eyes, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
So I need to read it. I need to write the thing. I need to let it sit, ideally at least a week, and read it through myself. So in other words, I have to get it up to as good as I can get it at that level before I even use anyone else. Because once someone's read it, they're sort of like they're never gonna read it again for the first time.
Mm-hmm.
If that makes sense. So you want to get the most out of their eyes. Like I just finished a draft of a book, and I do use technical editors, as you put it. It's a good phrase. I just finished a draft of a mystery, and who knows if it'll go anywhere, but it's drafted, that involves a visual artist, a painter. And I know a lot of the stuff from my mom, and I did a lot of research. This was during COVID, so I didn't actually go to Pearl Paint, but like I'd look stuff up online, like what does this tint look like? How do you make this? Blah blah blah. Video of someone mixing their own hues. And I gave it to a friend who's an artist who lives in the Brick Bottom Studios, and to read. And she brought up one point about a competition between two artists in a gallery, which I incorporated. But she said otherwise, like, I asked her specifically, like, is the art stuff right? And she said, yeah. But now, at some point again, I'll ask her to read it again, but like, I'll never get a first crack at her eyes again. So, and then I had other people read it for other things. Like I had a friend who's just killer on plot, and just, and I told her, it's like, she's also a really wonderful copy editor. I said, please don't read this with your copy editor hat on. Just read it and tell me if the story makes sense. And she said, yeah, she thought this one character was a little obvious. So it's like, that's useful. I can use that. And so now it's going through that. But yeah, now that my agent hasn't even seen it yet, it's still.
When you let it sit, do you move on to another manuscript or another book, another story that you were writing, or do you just take a break, not do any writing for that week while you just let things chill and then go back to it to finish it?
I want to say that I go move on to something else. It's hard to write something else while I'm working on something, but I was able to, in this case, I've moved on to, I had to do some work on Hold Me Down. So I did that, and now I am finally at the point where, this book is now, being read by other people. It's tentatively called The Blue Butterfly. And I'm trying to make myself go back to this other project that I started. I have about 60 pages of. And so I'm in the process of reading it through what I have to sort of get myself back into that mind frame. And so this week I should start writing it again.
Mm-hmm. Now, I noticed that there's something with a bunch of sticky notes on it there behind and to your right. Do you outline? Do you a pantser or a plotter, or how do you keep your series straight so that one doesn't bleed into another when you start a new book for a different series?
Very poorly. Um, sorry, this is for the blue butterfly. I haven't looked at this in a while. I'm realizing because art store. um, I am basically a pantser. Um, I wish that I could plot, but I find that if I plot things out too thoroughly, then they're not fun for me anymore. And then I won't write them. That said, I know that there are certain things that I want to happen or certain beats. And that's why it's really useful. I don't always use this, but why it's useful to do this, because I can say something like, I don't know how I'm going to get there, but in the middle, I want this to happen. And like, I can't even read my own handwriting. Becca's phone sounds, Maddie attacked. Who do you trust? I wrote. Okay, so this is from A Cat on the Case. Wow, so that's from a while ago. And like, I knew I wanted that to happen, but I didn't know when or where or how I'd get there. So but I wanted to, it seemed important to make a note of that. So I made a note and put that down. I feel like every time I write, I feel like I'm reinventing the wheel. Was it Stephen King who said that it's like writing is like driving in the fog with your headlights on? As long as you can see 6 feet ahead, you're okay. I think anyway, that's sort of true. It's like I know what happens next, and I sort of have a vague idea in my mind what's going to happen. But even that, it was World Enough, and actually this happened with Hold Me Down too. Both times I got to the end, and there was a surprise for me, and this is one of the really fun things about writing is it's a surprise to you. It's like, oh my God, could this work? And you go back and you realize you laid the clues for that all along. And that's sort of the magic of it. But that happens. So
On the
I
flip
don't know if
side of
that would
that,
happen
though,
if I plotted that. What?
on the flip side, though, you read it through and realize that you kind of back either not necessarily back yourself into a corner, but this person was actually the one who did the crime versus this one, but by the end it's this one here. You ever had that happen and have to go back and do a just small or a large rewrite?
I have had other people be the killers than I thought, but that really is when you go back, you realize, oh, that made sense. The revisions are always smaller than you thought. It's like the truth was always there. It's sort of fun.
Now, do you edit as you go? Because I have some who he'll write a couple paragraphs, but then he'll go back and they'll edit it to make sure, one, it sounds right, and make sure everything falls into place. He's kind of a pantser. Or do you? So I take it you write it all out and then you'll go back to the beginning and start
Yeah.
the editing process.
Yeah, Nick Lowe, the pub rocker from the band Rockpile, described his writing style as bash it out now, tart it up later. And I'm very much that way. Just get something down. Every sentence reads the same. Just get it down, and then you can go back and make it pretty. And sometimes things come out pretty anyway.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, and it's like half the time I'll write, and I'll write scenes that are like afterwards. It's like, you don't need this. Just cut it out. But maybe I needed to write that to get to this realization about the character. But just yeah, if and I fall prey to that too. Sometimes I will start editing myself, but then I could spend a year on the first paragraph.
Mm-hmm. Now, do you write things? Well, I know you have notes written out there too, but do you use like electronic devices to keep notes? Do you use, I guess, a program called Scrivener, or do you just sort of write it all up by hand or use Word or something? And
I write on the computer. What I have found very useful is I often ideas come to me when I'm walking, or I have a treadmill. I run on the treadmill, and so I will read notes into my phone. And so and because it's phone transcription, half the time they don't make sense afterwards. But sometimes it'll be like I'll walk into a store and be going, the poison was on her fingertips. And luckily people are very tolerant of me.
that was going to be my next question. When you're out, do you come up with all of a sudden, just wait a minute, don't talk to me. Give me a napkin, quick. Give me a napkin.
Yeah, yes, yes, yeah. Or you pull out the deposit receipt from the ATM and start scribbling on the back of it. Yeah. My husband, back in the days when we could go to live music, he actually writes a lot about jazz, and I often go with him, or I did back when the days when we went to shows. And there's a lot of jazz I really like, and there's a lot of jazz that I don't like. And so, but it's sort of wonderful for me because it sort of throws me into this sort of, I don't know, half asleep liminal trance state. And he's used to this now of me like grabbing his pad, you know, and an extra pen and like taking a piece of paper out of his pad and writing because it's like I'm sort of distracted enough. And, you know, and the problem then is we're usually someplace dark. So my handwriting is really bad. But yeah, that happens a lot. Sometimes if I'm good, I bring my own pad.
Do you keep a pad by your bedside?
Yep, I have several. Well, this is just right here. Yeah. And yeah, wow. This is my handwriting being a lot more legible than before. But yes, I keep a pad by my bedside and a pen. Because otherwise who knows what I'll try to write on a tissue or something. But yeah, I've learned to do that. And that and my talking to my phone.
Mm-hmm. So have you some of the ideas that you come up with, are they from being out and seeing somebody? Well, actually, here's a question. How do you develop your characters? Are they based on real people? Do you have an idea of what this person looks like, be it a famous person or someone that you saw walking down the street and, oh, I like the clothes that he or she is wearing, I'm going to write that in?
It's much more just sort of average people on the street. The people, they're real to me.
Right.
And often, I don't know, there's just something, I get a sense of them, and then I hear them, how they talk, and then sometimes I'll see them. Like I was in, I think it was, it was for the Dulcie short series. That's one of my paranormal series that we didn't talk about. In that Dulcie's beloved cat has died, and it now visits her as a ghost. And she's an academic. So I was in Widener Library at Harvard, and I was waiting. I think I was waiting to get a pass, and there was a window out on the portico where there's big steps that go down to the Harvard yard. And I saw like a young woman who was out there, and she was talking to a friend or something. And I was just like, "That's Dulcie." And maybe if I'd heard her voice, it wouldn't have been right. But there was just something about her look. And so now, then I knew that's what Dulcie looks like, and that's what she wears. And I already had her voice in my head. So yeah, I don't do like lookbooks or anything. It's just more like I'll see somebody. And to the point now where like my husband will say, "Oh, is that person Prue? Is that person Gal?" And I'll go, no, her hair's wrong.
Is it the same way with situations that you may come across at like the grocery store or just walking down the street and you see two people conversing or something, whatever it is, somebody in an argument? And, I like the way they're arguing, their body motions are and stuff.
Yeah.
I'm going to write that into.
Yeah. And he should be careful because she's carrying a knife. They probably aren't, but yeah. It just, well, I think probably all writers were just incredible eavesdroppers. And yeah, that involves just looking at body language and, what people are wearing and how they interact with each other. And like, just look at people walking down the street, especially these days, and the way people just sort of do this dance.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's just, there's just so much out there you can use, and it all just feeds into it.
Now you decided to go the traditional publishing route. How did you why did you decide to do that versus independent publishing, and how long did it take you to finally get your first book picked up with somebody?
I did it partly because I am old enough that it was just much more, there was much less independent publishing in those days. I was a journalist. I was working at the Boston Globe when my first book came out. My first 3 books were nonfiction. And my first book, which is memoir mixed with research about it's Madhouse, growing up in the shadow of mentally ill siblings. That came out of a magazine story I did for the Boston Sunday Globe magazine. And I got such an overwhelming response to that. That was one of those cases of you write about something you think you're the only one in the world, and you find out that it's really widespread. A lot of people have brothers or sisters who have schizophrenia or bipolar disorder or whatever. And I got just a ton of, I got tons and tons of letters. I realized there was so much more here. And I had this 6,000 word magazine story. I don't know if I thought of it or somebody said, this could be a book. I mean, I had like files of letters people had written. And I didn't know how to write a book or what to do. I had interviewed a woman, Susanna Kaysen, who wrote Girl Interrupted, I think, yeah. And about, she had a breakdown and been hospitalized, and she wrote about that. And so I'd been in touch with her agent who had allowed me, set me up with an interview with her. And we had this sort of interesting slight overlap. And I had worked as an editorial secretary at a magazine she had worked at years before. So, there was almost sort of like, 3 degrees of separation thing. And I was able to I reached out to her agent. And I said, you know me because I interviewed Susanna, Kaysen, and, thanks for setting that up. And that story ran here. I now have this other idea. Is this a book? Is this anything? And he said, yes. And he said, this is what you need to put together a proposal. And, I don't know, he's like, you need to write 60 pages of it, and you need to have an outline, and, just talk me through it. Do that and come back to me. And I did. And he sold it. And so that was my first book. And that just, got me into the cycle of, that's how you do books. And then when I went to fiction, somebody said, oh, you have to write the whole book first. I was like, okay. And I think at that point, did I have an agent? I did, and she was sending around, and so I started sending around to places. At that point, Poison Pen Press, you didn't need to be agented. So I sent it to them, and they're like, okay. But yeah, I mean, there's a lot of rejection and a lot of waiting. I like doing traditional publishing because I don't want to deal with the detail. I don't want to have to find my own copy editor. And I think you need a copy editor. I don't want to have to find my own story editor. I don't want to have to do the production. To me, it is worth it to wait and have somebody else deal with that stuff. If I write something that I love that I cannot get traditionally published, then I would go independent. To this point, I've been able to. So, to me, it's worth it. I know that right. I get a lot smaller of a share of my own books, but to me, it's worth it because they do all the crap work I don't want to do.
What are some of the marketing things that you did pre-pandemic and post or during pandemic? How did that all change your marketing strategy?
I used to visit bookstores. Yeah. I used to actually go to the bookstores and sign the books and talk to people. It was so wonderful. I miss it. This is lovely. Thank you for having me on. But can you imagine if we're talking and somebody wanders in for some entirely different reason and we start talking? Oh, that was so great. Yep. Other than that, I go to a lot of the conferences. I am planning on going to BoucherCon, which is one of the big mystery conferences, which is happening in New Orleans in August. I'm fully vaccinated. I'm hoping it still happens. I never thought I'd be saying I want to go to New Orleans in August, but I do. Things like Left Coast Crime. Up here in New England, we have the New England Crime Bake, which is wonderful. And they're still deciding whether or not it can be in person or virtual this year. Either way, it will be worth it. If any of your listeners, are interested, they should definitely, Google New England Crime Bake. It's so much fun. We usually have big star. We have local writers like me, but we have big stars. It's a blast. You get to talk to people. You can workshop your own books. You get to hear authors and, meet people and just, I just so hope we get to do it again in person. I'm social media, Yeah.
Yeah. That's one thing that I have a hard time with is social media. I'm just not that generation, but opening the store, I had to take a crash course in all those things. Do you belong to any organizations like Sisters in Crime or?
Yes, Sisters in Crime, a great organization. Mystery Writers of America, I'm a member of that. I'm a member of the Cat Writers Association as well.
So what are some of the things that do you have like bookmarks or did you get?
I used to do bookmarks. I haven't in a while, partly because, I
Yeah.
haven't been able to get out there.
Right.
But yeah, my publisher provides advanced reading copies, which are what we used to call bound galleys. And now a lot of those are ebooks. Like if reviewers and other people, book bloggers, if you join something like NetGalley,
Mhm.
or what's the other one? It's not called Evergreen. There are a couple of things where publishers, you can ask publishers for the advanced uncorrected copies, of which they will provide, and you can read them in exchange for you're supposed to talk about the book
Right.
or review it.
So speaking of electronic versions of your books, are any of your books available in audiobook form?
A lot of them are. I think almost all of them are. I think almost all of them are. So yeah, if you go on audio, I know this because my late mother-in-law, her last couple of years, she read all my books, but the last couple of years of her life, she was virtually blind. So I started getting her them as books on tape.
I think audiobooks are great. We partner with a company, and I'm looking it up now. We partner with a company called Libro FM,
Yes,
which
I
gives
think you'll
back
find a
to
lot of my
us.
books. Yeah,
That's what I'm looking for. um, they share the profits with us, so we do get a portion of the sales either through memberships or a la carte books, and they've been great. They send us listening copies that we can, and that's how we get a lot of. Whoa, look at that! Cat in a Case and Incantation of Cats, A Spell of Murder. So there you go. All
yeah.
you audiobook fans out there, you can get Clea's books through Libro FM. You just go to our website, hit on our link, and it'll take you.
Through your bookstore.
That's right. That's
Throw that
right.
link up. Support our
So what's that?
indies.
So what was that like? Having them on audiobook? Have you? Do you listen to your own books on, or do you say no? I'd rather not.
Yeah, I don't because the publishers and the companies, they hire really good people to do it, but it's not the people I hear in my head.
Hmm.
So I don't listen to them.
Well, I'm glad you said that because that is my next question, and I like asking this. Who, if you could have any voice actor or actress, TV or big screen, who would you want to narrate your book, be it just a single person or two people or a full cast? Because audiobooks, they have everything from just a single person to just the two people to entire cast.
Yeah.
Would you ever want just one person doing it? Who would that be? Or would you like a couple people, and who would they be?
Well, I'll tell you, in my fantasy, it's always who would play them in the movie.
Mhm.
And with the Prue Marlowe books, we were very much trying to get copies of those books to Gina Gershon, partly because she wrote a book about losing her cat and hunting for her cat. I was like,
Ah.
man. And with Gal Raver for Hold Me Down, boy, oh boy, would I love to either have Courtney Love or Angelina Jolie,
Okay.
or some magical combination between the two.
That'd be an interesting
A
combination.
tough woman who could really, kick some ass.
Right. Kind of like Lara Croft type.
Yes,
Okay. All right.
Laura Croft is a rock and roller.
Yes. Yep. So, of course, and I'm sure I know the answer to this, but would you love to see any of your books on the big screen or the small screen, Netflix type or
I would love that.
series or?
That's like hitting the jackpot. I would love that. I actually, it is a dream, but there is a producer who has already expressed a little interest in Hold Me Down, which
Hmm.
I'm very excited about. But there's many a slip twixt cup and lip. Um, I love it. I would love that. And I do understand because friends like Joe Finder has had several movies made out of his books. You have to let go. That's what I always hear is you have to let go because your book is still there.
Mhm.
Someone's going to rewrite it and do whatever they need to do to make it into a movie, and you just have to let them because your book is still your book, and they know about movies.
What series or what book would you really want to see out there?
Well, now I'm thinking Hold Me Down, and it's certainly timely, and man, I think it would be a great role for, a mature, an over 40-year-old woman. Um, And it has rock and roll. It's got lots of hot topics. I think it would be really fun to have the Witch Cats as a TV show because you've got three cats. They each have different personalities. So there could be just so many adventures. That would be
Well,
fun.
and
And it
with
could really be a family thing, that
yeah.
I like to think that there's enough wit there for adults, but there's nothing that would, you wouldn't want your kids to see. So
And with CGI, you could the
yeah,
cats could do anything and they can talk and all that kind of stuff
cats
too.
can do anything anyway.
That's right. That's right. Um, so what we'll finish up. Actually, there was something else I was going to say, but maybe I'll remember it. What are you reading now? What is your all-time favorite? All-time favorite. Mine's Les Miserables. I can't get enough of that book. It's a heavy book, but I love it. What is your all-time, whatever genre it's in, and what are you reading now?
Oh, you're going to get me in trouble. I have so many books from friends that I haven't gotten to yet. I haven't gotten to the new Joanna Schaffhausen. It's on my TBR file. I have Linda L. Richards' book. I have Leslie Budowitz's book. But the book I am reading now, just because it's on the top of the pile, is the Stacey Abrams, While Justice Sleeps.
Yep.
And so that's great fun. But I mean, I have so many books by so many people to read. All-time favorite, Hilary Mantel's A Place of Greater Safety, which anyone who knows me, I proselytize about this book. She's the writer. She's the British writer. She won several Booker Awards for Wolf Hall, and they did a TV adaptation of that. It's great, Mark Rylance. About Thomas Cromwell, who was an advisor to Henry VIII. But A Place of Greater Safety is her first big fat novel, and it's about basically the young people who started the French Revolution. And it is the most, and it's a big fat book. And my husband brought it home to me when he was essentially the books editor at the Boston Phoenix, and I'm a fast reader. So he brought it home like we have cats. We say that I've brought you a vole. Here's something that'll hold you for a while. And it just because of the size of it.
Right.
It is grimly funny. It's like, look at the book, open up. If you're not laughing out loud by the end of the third page, it's not the book for you. If you are, then you've got the same sick sense of humor as I do. I love that book. And you know how it ends, but it's just getting there I reread that book fairly regularly, and it's bloody as hell.
Oh, talking about a thick book, we just got in the Penguin copy of the Count of Monte Cristo.
Wow.
And that was 1260 some odd pages. I mean, that thing is a brick. So, well, I can't remember what else I was going to ask, but so I guess it wasn't that important. But we are out of time, though.
This has been lovely, though.
I do want to say yes, it was great speaking with you. All of Clea's books, as I mentioned, audiobooks available through Libro FM. Just go to our website or just go to Libro and you can click on or pick our store to sponsor. Hopefully we'll have some of your books in our store pretty soon. If not, they are available through bookshop.org. They're another one that we partner with and we do get a portion of sales. So don't forget bookshop.org. And of course, you probably go direct to you have a website as well.
And if you go to my website, which is cleasimon.com, you can choose where you buy from, including I think the website was still IndieBound, but that takes you to your closest, or you can choose whatever indie you want to buy from.
That's right, indiebound.org. That's definitely another one too. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much
this.
for having me.
And they sound like great books, and I'm definitely going to have to get a few of them, or at least get one of the series and get it started.
I want to come visit your shop and sign books and meet people.
Well, we're hoping that this summer, towards the end of summer, I'm keeping track and keeping watch on the website, CDC, all that kind of stuff, to see vaccinations, and we'll see how things progress. But I definitely would like to get something going, in-person stuff. So you're definitely on the list.
We will get there.
Yes, we will.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you very much, and
thank you.
Have a good night, and good luck with your upcoming releases.
Thank you so much. This has been wonderful. Thank you.